The auction hall reeked of desperation and greed. Neon lights flickered across chrome walls, while alien species from across the galaxy gathered to bid on the latest shipment of slaves. The Zephyrian slavers had outdone themselves this time, capturing over 300 beings from 17 different worlds. "Next up, we have something special," bellowed Vex Thornback, the four-armed auction master whose purple skin glistened under the harsh spotlights. His voice carried across the packed amphitheater, reaching every corner where buyers sat in their hovering platforms. A rare human female from the outer rim planet Earth. The crowd erupted in excited chittering, roars, and electronic beeps. Humans were legendary throughout the galaxy, not for their strength or intelligence, but for their stubbornness and unpredictable nature. Most civilized species avoided them entirely. Two hulking Zephyrian guards dragged a young woman onto the stage. Her auburn hair fell in tangled waves around her shoulders, and despite the energy shackles binding her wrists and ankles, she held her head high. Blood trickled from a cut above her left eyebrow, and her simple jumpsuit was torn in several places. "Look at those defiant eyes," Vex continued, his voice dripping with mock admiration. "This specimen goes by the name Sarah Chen. 24 standard years old, excellent physical condition, and according to our scanners, she possesses some rather interesting genetic markers." Sarah spat on the stage floor. "Go to hell, you purple freak." The audience gasped. Speaking without permission during an auction was unthinkable. Vex's four eyes narrowed, and his mandibles clicked together in annoyance. "Spirited. I love it." He laughed, but the sound held no warmth. Perfect for hard labor or entertainment purposes. From his luxury viewing box high above the main floor, Lord Commander Crix Valderon observed the proceedings with mild interest. The reptilian Valdorian noble was notorious throughout this sector for his cruelty and his collection of exotic slaves. His scaled face remained impassive as he sipped fermented nectar from a crystal goblet. "Shall I begin the bidding at 50,000 credits?" Vex called out. 100,000! Shouted a slug-like hut merchant from the far side of the arena. 150, countered a cybernetic Nexus trader. The bidding escalated rapidly. Sarah watched the alien faces around her, cataloging every detail. Her enhanced memory, a gift from her military cybernetic implants, recorded everything. The guard positions, the exit routes, the weapon placements, even the ventilation shafts. 500,000 credits. The voice came from above, cold and commanding. All heads turned toward Lord Commander Valderon's box. The massive reptilian stood slowly, his ceremonial armor catching the light. At over 8 feet tall with razor-sharp claws and teeth, he was an imposing figure even among the galaxy's most dangerous predators. Going once, twice Vex's voice trembled slightly. Even he knew better than to cross a Valdorian noble, sold to Lord Commander Valderon. The crowd applauded politely, though many seemed disappointed they wouldn't get to witness a prolonged torture session. Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. She'd heard whispers about Valderon during her time in the holding cells. The other prisoners spoke his name in hushed, terrified tones. Within minutes, the guards were dragging her through corridors toward the private docking bay where Valderon's ship waited. The Crimson Talon was a sleek Predator-class vessel, all black metal and sharp angles. It looked like it had been designed specifically to inspire fear. Sarah was thrown into a bare metal cell in the ship's lower deck. The energy field hummed to life, trapping her inside. As the ship lifted off, she could hear Valderon's footsteps approaching. "So," his voice rumbled to the corridor, "the famous human." He appeared outside her cell, and Sarah got her first close look at her new owner. His scales were deep green with gold patterns, and his yellow eyes held ancient intelligence. Scars crisscrossed his face and arms, evidence of countless battles. "I've heard fascinating stories about your species," he continued, studying her like a specimen in a laboratory. "Apparently, you're capable of remarkable feats when properly motivated." "Try me," Sarah said, meeting his gaze without flinching. Valderon's lipless mouth curved into what might have been a smile. "Oh, I intend to. You see, I have a theory about humans. Your kind possesses something most species lack. Call it rage, call it determination, call it stupidity. It matters not. What matters is that it can be harnessed." He pressed a control, and the energy field disappeared. Sarah tensed, ready to spring, but Valderon's next words stopped her cold. Your ship, the merchant vessel Aurora's Dream, had a crew of 37. We captured them all. 21 are already dead. The remaining 16 are my personal collection back on Valderon Prime. Their continued existence depends entirely on your cooperation. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Her crewmates, her friends, were alive but in this monster's hands. Captain Martinez, Engineer Wong, Navigator Hassan, all of them counting on her to somehow save them. Now, then, Valderon continued, stepping into the cell, let's discuss your new position in my household. The next 3 days passed in a blur of humiliation and pain. Valderon's estate on Valderon Prime was a fortress built into a mountainside, its black spires reaching toward the planet's 3 moons. Sarah was fitted with a slave collar and assigned to kitchen duty under the supervision of Matron Grix, a bitter old Zephyrian who took sadistic pleasure in making the new arrival suffer. The collar wasn't just for show. It monitored her vital signs, location, and stress levels. More importantly, it could deliver paralyzing electric shocks or even lethal doses of neurotoxin at the press of a button. Valderon wore the control device on his wrist like a piece of jewelry. Sarah endured the degradation while carefully observing everything around her. The guard rotations, the security systems, the layout of the compound. Her military training had taught her patience, and her genetic enhancements gave her advantages her captors didn't suspect. On the 4th day, everything changed. Valderon was hosting a dinner party for several other Valdorian nobles and their guests. Sarah and the other slaves were serving exotic delicacies and expensive wines while the aliens discussed their latest conquests and acquisitions. The humans put up quite a fight, Lord Nexus was saying, his mechanical voice grating through the translator. Their ships may be primitive, but their tactics were unexpected. Desperation makes even the weakest prey dangerous, Valderon replied, cutting into what looked like roasted meat. Speaking of which, let me show you my latest acquisition. He gestured towards Sarah, who was refilling water glasses at the far end of the table. A genuine Earth human, completely unbroken, despite my best efforts. Remarkable, said Lady Scythia, an elegant serpentine female whose scales shimmered like oil. I've always wondered about their supposed resilience. Would you like a demonstration? Valderon's eyes gleamed with malicious anticipation. He pressed a button on his wrist control, and Sarah's collar activated. Electric current coursed through her body, dropping her to her knees as the water pitcher shattered on the floor. She bit back a scream, refusing to give him the satisfaction. Impressive pain tolerance, noted General Krax, a massive insectoid whose mandibles clicked approvingly. Most species would be unconscious by now. Valderon increased the voltage. Sarah's muscles spasmed, but she managed to lift her head and glare at him with pure hatred. The assembled nobles murmured appreciatively. Enough? Lady Scythia said, sounding almost bored. We get the point. Valderon deactivated the collar, and Sarah collapsed, gasping. Her enhanced physiology was already working to repair the cellular damage, but she made sure to appear more injured than she actually was. Clean up this mess, Valderon commanded, and bring fresh water. Sarah struggled to her feet, gathered the broken glass with shaking hands, and retreated to the kitchen. Matron Grix was waiting with a sneer. Clumsy human. Now everyone thinks I can't train proper servants. The old Zephyrian struck Sarah across the face with a wooden spoon. It stung, but Sarah had endured far worse during her military training. She bowed her head submissively. Forgive me, matron. It won't happen again. See that it doesn't. Sarah returned to the dining room with a new pitcher, her movements carefully calculated to appear weak and submissive. The nobles had moved on to discussing trade routes and planetary annexations, paying no attention to the human slave moving quietly around the table. That was their first mistake. As Sarah poured wine for General Krax, she noticed a small data pad lying beside his plate. Her enhanced vision caught a glimpse of the display, military deployment schedules, and fleet positions. Information that could be valuable to the human resistance, if any of them were still alive. She memorized every detail in the 3 seconds she had before moving on to the next guest. Her implants cataloged the information automatically, filing it away with everything else she'd observed during her captivity. The evening dragged on. More wine flowed, and the conversation became increasingly crude. The nobles began discussing their various slaves and the creative ways they'd found to break different species. Sarah listened to every word while maintaining her facade of broken servitude. Finally, near midnight, the guests began to depart. Sarah and the other slaves cleared the table and cleaned the dining hall under Matron Grix's watchful eye. When the work was finished, they were dismissed to their quarters in the basement levels. Sarah's cell was a 3-meter cube carved from a mountain's bedrock. A thin mattress, a water dispenser, and a waste disposal unit were her only amenities. The door was solid metal with an energy field backup, and surveillance cameras monitored every corner. But Sarah Chen had not survived 3 years of guerrilla warfare against the Zephyrian occupation by giving up easily. As she lay on her mattress, staring at the ceiling, she began to plan. Her enhanced genetics weren't just military-grade cybernetics. They were something far more dangerous, something the aliens had never encountered before. The human government's Black Ops division had been experimenting with adaptive enhancement protocols, creating soldiers who could evolve rapidly in response to threats. Sarah was one of only 12 successful test subjects. And now, after days of studying her captors, she was ready to show them exactly what a human could become when pushed too far. The collar around her neck monitored her vital signs, but it couldn't detect the subtle changes happening at the cellular level. Her body was adapting, growing stronger, faster, more resilient with each passing hour. The alien technology that should have suppressed her was actually accelerating the process. Tomorrow, she decided, would be very different. As sleep finally claimed her, Sarah's dreams were filled with fire and revenge. The aliens thought they had broken her spirit. They were about to learn just how wrong they could be. In his private chambers high above, Lord Commander Valderon reviewed the evening's entertainment with satisfaction. The human had performed exactly as expected, cowering and subservient. Perhaps he would keep her alive a bit longer. Let his guests enjoy a few more demonstrations before the novelty wore off. He had no way of knowing that in the depths of his own fortress, evolution was taking its course. And Sarah Chen was about to become something far more dangerous than any human the galaxy had ever seen. Hashtag, he slapped the human girl in chains. 10 minutes later, she made him kneel in front of everyone. Dawn broke over Valda Prime like a crimson wound across the sky. Sarah Chen woke with every muscle in her body humming with barely contained energy. The adaptive enhancements were complete. Her cellular structure had rebuilt itself overnight, creating something that would have terrified the scientists who originally designed her. She sat up slowly, testing her new capabilities. Her vision was sharper, able to detect minute details in the dim light. Her hearing picked up conversations 3 floors above. Most importantly, she could feel the electromagnetic signature of every piece of technology in the fortress, including the collar around her neck. The morning routine began like any other. Matron Grix's harsh voice echoed through the slave quarters, ordering everyone to their assigned duties. Sarah moved with the same submissive shuffle she perfected over the past days, but inside, she was calculating. Human, Grix barked, pointing a gnarled finger at Sarah. Lord Valderon wants his private study cleaned. Touch nothing except dust, or I'll have you fed to the rock eels. Perfect. Sarah bowed her head respectfully. Yes, matron. Valderon's study was on the fortress's highest level, a circular room with massive windows overlooking the valley below. The walls were lined with trophies from his conquests, weapons, skulls, and data crystals containing the histories of extinct civilizations. At the center sat his personal command console, connected directly to the fortress's security grid. Sarah began dusting the shelves, moving slowly while her enhanced senses mapped every circuit, every connection, every weakness in the room systems. Her touch left microscopic traces of bioconductive material on key surfaces, creating a network only she could access. Admiring my collection? Sarah spun around, her heart racing. Valderon stood in the doorway, his yellow eyes studying her with predatory interest. She hadn't heard him approach, which meant he'd been deliberately silent. Forgive me, Lord Commander. I was just cleaning as ordered. He walked to the central console, his claws clicking against the metal floor. "Do you know what this crystal contains?" He picked up a glowing blue shard from a place of honor, the complete genetic code of the Altarian species. They were healers, you see, could regenerate from almost any injury. I collected their essence before rendering them extinct. Sarah forced herself to remain still, though every instinct screamed at her to tear his throat out. "Very impressive, my lord." "Indeed." He set the crystal down and turned to face her fully. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, about human potential. I believe it's time for a more intensive demonstration." Fear flickered in Sarah's eyes, but not for the reason Valderon expected. She was afraid she might not be able to control what happened next. "My guests from last night are returning this evening," he continued. "They were quite intrigued by your performance. I promised them something even more spectacular. What did you have in mind, my lord?" Valderon's smile was pure malice. "A hunt. You'll be released into the mountain wilderness with a 10-minute head start. My guests and I will pursue you for sport. The one who brings back your head wins a prize." Sarah's enhanced metabolism had already begun flooding her system with combat stimulants. She could feel her heart rate stabilizing, her muscles coiling like springs. But her voice remained steady. "How exciting for them! Aren't you afraid?" Valderon seemed disappointed by her calm response. "Would it matter if I was?" He laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "Probably not." "Very well. Continue your cleaning. Tonight we hunt." As soon as he left, Sarah's facade cracked. Her fists clenched, and she could feel the bioconductive traces she'd left responding to her neural patterns. The fortress's systems were now partially under her control, though she'd need be careful not to trigger any alarms. She spent the rest of the day in preparation, using her access to the kitchen to obtain certain chemicals. A pinch of sodium from the salt stores, potassium from the fruit preservatives, sulfur from the spice rack. To anyone watching, she was simply a clumsy slave making minor mistakes. By evening, she had everything she needed. The hunting party assembled in the main courtyard as the sun set. Valderon had invited 6 guests, all wealthy nobles eager for blood sport. They wore adaptive camouflage suits and carried energy weapons that could drop a charging rhinosaur. Sarah stood before them in her simple jumpsuit, looking small and vulnerable. "The rules are simple," Valderon announced. "The human gets 10 minutes to run. After that, we track her down. No energy weapons until the final kill shot. We want this to last." General Crax's mandibles clicked with anticipation. "What if she surrenders?" "No quarter given. This is a hunt to the death." Lady Scythia coiled her serpentine body in excitement. "How delightfully primitive. I haven't had a proper hunt in decades." Sarah said nothing. Her enhanced hearing picked up their heartbeats. Her vision cataloged their weapons and weak points. When Valderon removed her collar, she rubbed her neck as if relieved, but she was actually making final adjustments to her bioconductive network. 10 minutes starts now," Valderon said, pressing control on his bracer. "Run, little human. Make it interesting." Sarah turned and sprinted toward the forest. The nobles laughed behind her, making crude jokes about her chances of survival. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed. The moment she was out of sight, Sarah's true nature emerged. Her enhanced physiology shifted into combat mode, muscles expanding, reflexes accelerating to superhuman levels. She bounded between trees with impossible grace, her feet barely touching the ground. But she wasn't running away. She was positioning herself. 8 minutes later, she circled back toward the fortress. Her bioconductive network had grown stronger, connecting with every electronic system she'd touched over the past days. Security cameras, door locks, environmental controls, even the fortress's main power grid, all of it was now partially under her command. The 10-minute mark passed. Hunting horns echoed to the mountains as the nobles set out in pursuit. They moved in a loose formation, thermal scanners sweeping the forest floor for her heat signature. Sarah watched them from her hiding spot in the upper branches of an ironwood tree. Her body temperature had dropped to match her surroundings, making her invisible to their sensors. One by one, She began to pick them off. The first to die was Lord Nexus, the cybernetic traitor. Sarah dropped silently behind him, her enhanced strength allowing her to snap his mechanical spine before he'd cry out. She took his weapon and communication device, then melted back into the shadows. The second victim was a hut merchant named Gorba. Sarah had observed his love of exotic foods during the previous evening's dinner. The paralytic toxin she'd synthesized from kitchen chemicals worked quickly, leaving him conscious but unable to move as she dragged him to a cliff edge. "This is for every innocent life you bought and sold," she whispered and pushed. His scream echoed through the mountains, alerting the other hunters that something had gone wrong. Sarah smiled grimly. Fear was a weapon, and she intended to use it. "Nexus. Gorba. Report." Valderon's voice crackled through the comm system. "Silence." "Something's wrong," Lady Scythia hissed. "Humans don't hunt. They run and hide." "This one's different," General Crack said, his compound eyes scanning the darkness. "I can smell her. She's close." Sarah was indeed close. She hung upside down from a branch directly above them, perfectly still. Her enhanced vision tracked their movements while her bioconductive network fed her data from every sensor in the area. When General Crack separated from the group to investigate a suspicious sound, Sarah struck. She landed on his back, her fingers finding the nerve clusters that controlled his wings. He collapsed, paralyzed but alive. "Hello, General," she said conversationally. "Remember yesterday, when you laughed while Valderon tortured me?" "I remember." "You cannot do this," he chittered. "I am a noble of the Craxian Empire." "Were," Sarah corrected. "Past tense." She left his body as a warning for the others, and faded back into the forest. 3 down, 4 to go. The remaining hunters had clustered together now, backs pressed against each other as they scanned the darkness. Sarah could smell their fear, hear their rapid breathing. Good. Let them know what it felt like to be prey. "She's toying with us," whispered Duke Zelen, a crystalline being whose faceted body reflected the moonlight. "This isn't possible. Humans are weak." "Clearly, our intelligence was flawed," Valderon growled. His reptilian head swiveled constantly, searching for threats. "No matter. She's still just one creature against 4 trained killers." Sarah's laughter drifted through the trees, echoing from multiple directions at once. "Trained killers? Is that what you call yourselves?" "I call you cowards who prey on the helpless." "Show yourself," Lady Scythia screamed. "As you wish." Sarah dropped from the canopy like a falling star, landing in the center of their group. Before they could react, she triggered her bioconductive network. Every electronic device within 50 meters overloaded simultaneously. Weapons exploded. Comm units sparked. Even their breathing apparatus short-circuited. Duke Zelen shattered like glass when his life support failed. Lady Scythia collapsed, her cybernetic implants fried. Count Voros, a slug-like creature, simply melted as his environment suit stopped regulating his body chemistry. Only Valderon remained, and he was magnificent in his fury. 8 feet of scale muscle and razor claws, roaring challenge at the night sky. His natural armor had protected him from the electromagnetic pulse, and his weapons were old-fashioned steel and plasma. "Finally," Sarah said, standing slowly. "Just you and me." "Impossible." Valderon snarled. "You're just a slave, a broken little human." "I was never broken," Sarah replied, her voice carrying deadly calm. "I was learning, adapting, evolving." They circled each other in a moonlit clearing, predator and prey roles reversed. Valderon was larger, stronger in brute terms, with natural weapons that could slice through steel. But Sarah had advantages he couldn't comprehend. He lunged first, claws extended to disembowel her. Sarah moved like liquid lightning, slipping past his guard to strike pressure points along his spine. Valderon stumbled but recovered quickly, his tail whipping around to catch her across the ribs. The blow would have killed a normal human. Sarah rolled with it, using the momentum to put distance between them. She could feel bruised ribs healing already, her enhanced physiology working overtime. "What are you?" Valderon demanded, confusion replacing his earlier confidence. "Evolution," Sarah said simply. The fight continued for several more minutes, a deadly dance between alien strength and human adaptability. Valderon was skilled, but he was fighting according to rules Sarah had transcended. Every time he adjusted his tactics, she evolved new countermeasures. Finally, she saw her opening. Valderon overextended on a killing blow, and Sarah flowed inside his guard. Her fingers found the neural cluster at the base of his skull, the spot she'd identified during her days of observation. Valderon froze, his entire nervous system suddenly under her control. "Kneel!" she commanded. His body obeyed against his will, massive legs folding until he was prostrate before her. His eyes burned with rage and humiliation, but he could no more resist than he could stop his heart from beating. "This is impossible," he whispered. "No," Sarah said, her hand still pressed against his spine. "This is justice." She reached into her jumpsuit and withdrew a small device she'd assembled from components stolen throughout the fortress. It looked like a standard slave collar, but the electronics inside were far more sophisticated. "My turn to demonstrate," she said, snapping the collar around Valderon's thick neck. "This little beauty interfaces directly with your nervous system. You'll do exactly what I command when I command it." She stepped back and activated the device. Valderon's body remained kneeling, but his consciousness was still his own, trapped inside flesh that no longer obeyed him. "The irony is delicious, don't you think?" Sarah asked conversationally. "All those years of enslaving others, and now you get to experience it yourself." "Kill me," Valderon pleaded. "Oh no, death will be far too merciful. You're going to live a very long time, my lord, and every moment of it will be spent serving those you once oppressed." Sarah activated her bioconductive network one final time, sending a signal that unlocked every cell in the fortress. Alarms began wailing as hundreds of slaves poured into the courtyards, finally free after years of captivity. Among them were 16 humans, the survivors of Sarah's crew. Captain Martinez looked older, scarred by his ordeal, but his eyes blazed with the same fire that had made him a legend in the outer colonies. "Sarah? My God, we thought you were dead." "Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated," she said with a grin. "How are the others?" "Alive. Battered, but alive." "How did you?" His words died as he saw Valderon kneeling motionless in the clearing. "Long story. Right now, we need to secure this fortress and contact the resistance. Valderon's databases contain intelligence on every Zephyrian military installation in this sector." As dawn broke over Valder Prime for the second time since Sarah's capture, the fortress that had been a symbol of alien oppression became a beacon of human defiance. The slaves had become masters, the hunters had become prey, and the galaxy was about to learn a hard lesson about underestimating humanity. In the days that followed, word spread across the star systems. The human who had been slapped in chains, broken, and humiliated had risen to make her captors kneel. The Zephyrian Empire, which had seemed unstoppable, suddenly found itself facing an enemy that refused to stay defeated. And in the depths of space, on ships fleeing toward human territory, freed slaves carried with them stories of Sarah Chen, the woman who had reminded the galaxy that evolution was not a process that stopped when it became inconvenient for those in power. Some called her a terrorist. Others whispered she was humanity's answer to extinction. But to the hundreds of beings she had liberated, she was something far simpler and far more dangerous. She was hope, and hope, once kindled, was impossible to extinguish.